around and look at the lifeguards to reassure myself. They're talking amongst themselves. If anyone had gotten in trouble in a riptide, they would have seen it. We would have heard the whistles and sirens. So I tuck Lolo's shoe and sock underneath my arm and hurry across the hot sand towards the pier, where I'm not usually allowed to go by myself. I'm out of breath and soaked in sweat when I reach the top step. Gulls screech and hover overhead as I draw closer to see he's one of the people gathered at the far end. Finally, I spot his yellow cap. He's there with a group of men who are fishing. A surge of relief washes over me, and I break into a run. "Lolo," I shout, but he ignores me. Instead, he leans over the edge with the others, watching as the angler works his line. People yell instructions at the fisherman's rod as the fisherman's rod bends like a sea. "Loosen the drag," a man says. "You don't know how tired he is." Lolo's face looks bright with excitement. He still doesn't turn. Even when I touch his back, I notice that his naughty toes are all red. The sand must have felt like lava. Didn't he notice? And has he gotten too much sun on his ears too? They're a deep color of raw meat and blisters are already bubbling. We'll hear complaints from Abuela later for sure. My heart finally starts to slow down as I reach for his elbow again. "Hey," my voice sounds hard in a way that surprises me too. "Lolo." "It's a barracuda," he whispers. "Mirala." I look over the side where he's pointing. A long silver fish glistens like a metal line. The men cheer and pull slower over the wooden railing, withering for breath. It looks so fierce with those big eyes, its underbite of shiny teeth. But I can't help feeling bad as everyone circles to watch it flap and die. The sight of it struggling makes me want to cry. I nudge Lolo hard and finally blurt out my complaint. "Why didn't you tell Poppy where you were going?" I say. "We've been looking for you, and you left your stuff too close to the water." I'm talking to him the way I do to the twins sometimes. Bossy, fed up. But Lolo doesn't seem to notice. In fact, he looks confused for a second, as if I'm no one he knows. It makes me even madder. "That's all that's left of your things," I tell him, holding the shoe. "The rest was sucked away. What are you going to tell Abuela?" Another lie, I want to add. Lolo looks down at his feet and wiggles his toes, chuckling. The sound of a familiar laugh finally lets me take a breath. Here, I pull his wet socks and slip them over his feet. It's better than nothing, and at least your feet won't burn anymore on the sand. We can rinse the gull poop off and buy you rubber flip-flops when we go to lunch. "Gracias, Inés," he says. "You're a good daughter." I straighten up and look carefully into his face. "I'm Merci, Lolo," I tell him. "Tia Inés is at home." "Merci?" he whispers. We start back up at the pier. Waves crash against the pilings and spray us as we walk along. He seems a little unsteady, so I link my arms to his elbow, thinking back to the fall on his bike. Poppy is still at the casino, out on the veranda. He shields his eyes and looks for us. I guide Lolo to the bench to rest and send a text. "At the pier. See us?" I watch as he digs in his pocket to his phone and checks the message. When he looks in our direction, he spots me waving. A few seconds later, my phone vibrates. "Wait there." I sit down next to Lolo. Suddenly, I'm feeling drained and sweaty. "You scared me, Lolo," I say. Tears fill my eyes, so I don't say anything else. He pats my hand, but he doesn't seem to notice I'm upset. "You'll never believe it," he said. "Fico caught a barracuda in the river. You should have seen it." I blink, a heaviness filling in my chest. Fico? The river? The only Fico I've ever heard of was Lolo's older brother. None of us met him. He's the one who drowned when they were boys back in Cuba. I just watched the gulls dive for the surf, screeching. This time, I don't bother to correct him at all. All right, you guys did a wonderful job staying on task and listening while I was reading the chapter. So now I want us to look at a story map, and I want us to think about how we can fill this in using our chapter 12 of Merci Suarez Changes Gears. So I'm just going to pull that up for a second. All right, so as we can see, we have 6 blocks, and each of them has a different thing that goes in the block. So our first circle that we have right here is title and author. So obviously our book is Merci Suarez Changes Gears. And it's written by Meg Medina. All right, so let's just start in this top corner. So the main characters in a story, as we said earlier, and we've learned in previous lessons before, our main characters are the people that the story is focused on. They contribute greatly to the storyline. All right, and we also talked about supporting characters who are also the people that are in the story, but they're not as important. They aren't the main focus, but they still play a part in our story. So people that also play a part in the story, but are not the main focus. All right, so now that we have main characters and supporting characters, we also know what setting is. And as we said earlier, setting is where and when the story takes place. And then these other two, these are the two that I mentioned earlier that, you know, I said we haven't learned yet, but we're going to learn today. And I know by the end of today, you guys are going to be rock stars whenever you go to do this. So first, let's talk about the problem. So problem is basically what it sounds. It's something that happens in the story that is probably not very good. So let's just go ahead and add that. So it's probably something that goes wrong. Or something bad that happens. All right. And then we have our solution. So, you know, usually whenever we have a problem or something that's wrong in our story, you know, usually by the end of the story, it gets fixed, right? So our solution is how the story gets fixed, or how the problem in the story gets fixed. All right. So that is what each of the bubbles in our story map, what goes in there. And then now I want us to see if we can fill out our story map graphic organizer using the chapter book. So we are going to work in partners today. I want you to just turn and talk to the person next to you. But before we get started, I just want us to remember that when we are working with partners, we always want to stay on task and only be talking about what needs to be discussed, right? If we have like stories or something cool to tell our partner, that's great, but we can wait and talk about it after class, right? Okay. I also want us to remember only one person needs to be talking at a time. So if I'm partnered up with you, if I'm the one talking, I expect you to be actively listening and acknowledging when I say, but you don't need to interrupt me or anything. If you have something to say, just wait until I'm finished talking and say, I agree with you or I disagree with you because. All right. So what I want us to do when you are with your partner, I want you to think about, go to your story map, right? Everyone's going to have their own story map to fill out, a blank one. And I want you to think of the main characters. who are the main characters in this chapter. And I want you to just go ahead and fill that bubble out. All right. And then just move on to supporting characters, setting, and then problem and solution. All right. And then whenever everyone has this done, all the partners are done and everything, we're going to come back and discuss it. Okay. All right. Go ahead and get started with your partner.